The twin suns of Valora 9 burned weakly through the gray smog that hung over the colony. Dust floated in the air, and people hurried through the narrow streets, covering their faces from the metallic wind. Among them walked Lyra, a tall alien woman with silver-blue skin and tired eyes that once glowed like moonlight. Now her glow had dimmed. She carried a small bag on her shoulder, everything she owned after her husband's death. Her thin fingers trembled as she clutched a piece of worn cloth, once part of his mining uniform. The colony had moved on, but she had not. Everywhere she went, doors quietly closed. Vendors turned away. The whispers followed her like a cold wind. "Isn't that the widow from the mining blast?" someone murmured. "Don't go near her," another replied. "They say her kind brings bad luck." Lyra lowered her head and kept walking. Her child Sarah waited at home, hungry, weak, and coughing from the dust. Lyra had searched for work every day for 3 weeks. Nobody wanted an alien widow, not since the explosion that killed 20 men, 19 humans, and 1 Valen, her husband. The official report had called it an accident, but people whispered that her husband had caused it, that he had made a mistake, that his alien hands were not meant to touch human machinery. Lyra knew better. He had been careful, gentle. He loved his work. But truth didn't matter here. Not anymore. Her credits were almost gone. The rent was due tomorrow. She could already hear her landlord's harsh voice in her head. No money, no roof. She stopped at a junction where neon lights blinked in broken rhythm. A human repair shop stood there, small but sturdy, its metal sign flickering. Cross Mechanics, ship repairs and salvage. Lyra hesitated. She had passed this shop before but never dared to enter. Humans didn't hire Valen workers, not since the accident. But this was her last chance. Her child needed food. She pushed the door open. A bell chimed. Inside, the smell of oil and heat filled the air. Machines stood half taken apart on metal tables. A man worked near the back, sparks flying from his welding tool. He looked up. His eyes were sharp but calm. He was human. Broad shoulders, scar across one cheek, sleeves rolled up, grease on his arms. His name tag read Evan Cross. Behind him, a younger man, his assistant, paused mid-laugh when he saw her. Boss," the assistant said, whispering. "We don't serve her kind." Lyra's heart thudded. She wanted to turn and leave, but she stood firm. "I am not here for service," she said softly. "I am looking for work." Evan removed his welding mask and studied her face. "Work? Yes, I can fix machinery. Small units, mostly. I used to help my husband at the mines," the assistant scoffed. "Sure you did. Maybe that's why the mine blew up." Lyra flinched but didn't look away. She'd heard worse. Evan frowned at his assistant. "That's enough, Joel." He turned back to Lyra. "You're Valen, right?" "Yes," she whispered. "You know human tech?" "Some. Enough to help." The room went quiet except for the buzz of a broken light. Evan studied her hands, thin but steady, scarred with burn marks. The kind only real workers had. Finally, he nodded toward a pile of broken engine parts. "You fix that, I'll pay you for the day. If not, no harm done." Joel groaned. "You can't be serious. She'll just mess it up." Evan didn't answer. He just said, "Everyone deserves one chance." Lyra blinked, not sure if she'd heard right. She stepped forward, her heart racing. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, and for the first time in months she felt something familiar. The quiet pulse of a machine. It was like hearing an old friend whisper through static. She knelt and began to work. Her movements were gentle, deliberate. The humans in the shop watched in silence. After a few minutes, the faint hum of power filled the air. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. Joel's mouth dropped open. "That's impossible. That thing's been dead for weeks." Evan crossed his arms, hiding a small smile. "Looks like it just needed the right hands." Lyra stood slowly, her chest rising and falling. "Do I stay?" she asked. Evan nodded. "1-week trial. Let's see what you can really do." A warmth spread through Lyra's chest, a feeling she hadn't known since her husband's death. Hope. As she stepped outside, the evening sky glowed faintly orange. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile. She would buy food for Sarah tonight. Maybe things could change. Maybe not everyone hated her. But across the street, 2 men watched her from the shadows. Their eyes cold, their voices low. "Novacor won't like this," one muttered. "Then we'll make sure she doesn't last the week," the other replied. Lyra didn't see them. She walked home under the dying light, unaware that danger had already started to follow her, and so began the story of the alien widow and the human who would change her life forever. The next morning, the twin suns rose pale and red over the rust-colored horizon of Valora 9. The air smelled of dust and metal, like it always did in the colony's lower district. Inside Cross Mechanics, the sounds of clanging tools, hissing steam, and muttered curses filled the shop. Evan Cross stood by a half-disassembled shuttle engine, tightening bolts with steady hands. He was a man who preferred machines to people. They were simpler, quieter, more honest. People lied. Machines didn't. They either worked or they didn't. When the doorbell rang, he looked up and saw Lyra standing there again. She looked nervous, clutching a small food box for her child, her blue skin faintly glowing in the morning light. "You're early," Evan said, wiping grease from his hands. "I didn't want to be late," Lyra replied softly. Behind him, Joel, his young assistant, groaned. "Great, the alien's back." Evan shot him a warning glare. "You got a problem, Joel?" "Yeah," Joel muttered. "Plenty. But I'll keep it to myself." Lyra ignored the remark. She walked quietly to the workstation Evan had shown her yesterday. The same pile of broken parts waited there, metal pieces that looked hopelessly twisted. She knelt down and began sorting them, humming softly to herself. Evan noticed. Her hum was low, rhythmic, almost like the vibration of a machine. It made him pause. "What are you doing?" he asked. Lyra looked up. "Listening." "Listening?" She nodded. "Metal has memory. If you touch it gently, you can feel what broke inside. It's like..." Evan didn't laugh. He'd heard old engineers say similar things in the war. Some people had a touch for machines. Maybe she was one of them. Joel rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right, the metal's crying now." But after only an hour, Lyra had already rebuilt half the fusion intake valve. The part had been lying there for months, impossible to fix. Yet somehow, under her careful hands, it looked whole again. Evan watched her quietly. She worked with strange grace, fast but precise. Every movement had purpose. He handed her a wrench. "Here, try this." She hesitated, then took it carefully. "Thank you," Joel snorted. "You're wasting tools on her now?" "Quiet," Evan said, his voice sharp as a blade. For a moment, the shop was filled only with the hum of machinery. Lyra didn't stop until the valve clicked into place. She pressed the power switch. The engine coughed, then came alive with a smooth, steady roar. Joel's jaw dropped. That's not possible," Evan smiled faintly. "You keep saying that." Lyra wiped the sweat from her forehead, her glowing eyes bright again for the first time in months. "It was just a loose flow regulator," she said simply. "Just," Joel muttered. "I've been staring at that thing for weeks." Evan clapped him on the shoulder. "Maybe you should start listening to the machines, huh?" Joel grumbled and walked off, but Evan stayed watching Lyra. Something about her reminded him of himself. Tired, scarred, but still standing. He offered her a bottle of water. "You did good," she accepted it carefully. "Thank you for letting me stay." Evan nodded. "1 week, like I said. We'll see how it goes." As the day went on, Lyra worked quietly beside him. The other customers who came into the shop stared, whispering to each other. Some refused to come inside. One man spat on the ground near her feet and muttered, "Aliens should stick to their own kind." Evan grabbed the man by his jacket and shoved him outside. "Not in my shop," the man glared. "You're defending them now? The ones who killed our miners?" Evan's eyes darkened. "My brother died in that blast. You think I don't know what happened?" He paused, voice low. "But blaming one widow won't bring him back." The man left, muttering curses. Lyra stood frozen, her hands trembling. "Your brother?" Evan exhaled. "Yeah, he worked at Novacor, too. He was there that day." She looked down. "I'm sorry." "I didn't know," he nodded once. "You didn't need to." They went back to work in silence. But inside, something shifted. For the first time, someone had spoken to her without hate, someone who had every reason to hate her, but didn't. As the sun set, the air outside turned cold. Lyra gathered her things. "I will return tomorrow," she said softly. Evan nodded. "Be careful out there. The colony's not kind after dark," she smiled faintly. "It never is." When she left, Evan stood by the window, watching her disappear into the foggy street. He noticed a shadow move behind her, 2 men following at a distance. He frowned. Something about them felt wrong. Joel came up beside him. "You think she's trouble, boss?" Evan didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the dark street. "No," he said finally. "I think trouble's looking for her." Outside, the wind howled through the colony streets. And as Lyra walked home, unaware of the figures tailing her, one thing became clear. Her second chance had already made her enemies, and the human mechanic who gave it was about to risk far more than his business. The next day began with thunder in the skies and tension in the air. The colony's weather shields were failing again. Rain mixed with ash fell over the streets of Valora 9, turning the ground into oily puddles. Lyra pulled her thin hood tighter around her face and hurried toward the workshop. Her boots splashed through the dirty water, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to be late. When she reached Cross Mechanics, she found Evan already working, his hands buried inside the engine core of a damaged cargo ship. Sparks flew around him as he muttered under his breath. "You're here early again," he said without looking up. "I didn't sleep much," Lyra admitted. "My child was coughing. The air filters in our block stopped working." Evan stopped welding. "You tell the landlord?" "He doesn't listen," she said quietly. "He says alien lungs don't matter." Evan's jaw tightened. "Then he's a fool." He straightened, wiped his hands, and gestured toward the back of the shop. "Come here. I've got something for you." Lyra followed him to a large metal crate. Inside it sat a machine unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Cables, glowing tubes, and a humming energy core. Its metal surface was cracked, leaking faint blue plasma that hissed as it touched the air. "This," Evan said, "is a fusion regulator. Belongs to a mining ship. Been dead for months. Every tech in the colonies tried to fix it." Lyra tilted her head. "You want me to try?" Evan crossed his arms. "You fix this, you're hired full-time. Fail and..." He shrugged. "You'll still get paid for the day." Lyra stepped closer, feeling the heat from the core. The machine thrummed like a heartbeat, weak and irregular. She touched the metal gently, her glowing fingers tracing the cracked lines. Joel walked in, chewing on a protein bar. "You're letting her touch that thing? It'll explode." Evan didn't move. "Then stand back." Joel scoffed but obeyed. "She'll fry herself, boss." "You'll see." Lyra ignored him. She closed her eyes and listened. Every Valen child was taught to hear the world differently, to feel the quiet rhythm beneath sound. To humans, it was nonsense. To her, it was survival. She heard the machine's pain, the broken pulse of its core, the misaligned circuits screaming for balance. Slowly, she began adjusting the wiring. Her movements were small, precise, like she was calming a frightened creature. Evan watched her, fascinated. She wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what to do. Minutes turned into hours. Sweat rolled down her neck, her breathing shallow. The machine flickered, coughed, and went dark again. Joel smirked. "Told you," but Lyra didn't stop. She pressed her hand against the main panel, whispering in her language. Soft, melodic words that echoed strangely through the metal walls. The fusion regulator's glow shifted from dull red to bright blue. A low hum filled the room. The lights flickered once, twice, then stayed on. It was alive. The machine purred smoothly, stable and strong. Joel dropped his protein bar. That's impossible." Evan stepped forward, eyes wide. He checked the readings on his console. "Power flow's stable. Output's better than before the failure." Lyra smiled faintly, wiping her hands on her apron. "It was afraid," she said softly. "It needed calm." Joel blinked. "Afraid? It's a machine." Evan gave a short laugh. "Whatever it was, it worked." He looked at Lyra with new respect. "You just fixed what a dozen engineers couldn't." She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you. I only listened." For the first time since she'd met him, Evan smiled fully. "You're something else, Lyra." But before she could answer, a sharp sound came from outside, the sound of a rock hitting glass. Evan rushed to the window. A crowd had gathered near the shop. Angry faces. Humans holding signs made of scrap metal and paint. The words scrawled across them were ugly. "Aliens out. No jobs for murderers." Lyra froze. Joel cursed under his breath. "It's the Miners' Guild. They found out." Evan stepped outside. The moment the door opened, shouts filled the air. "You're protecting her, Cross. That freak shouldn't be working here." Evan shouted back. "She's done more for this colony than any of you standing here." A man threw another rock. It smashed against the doorframe. "You're choosing her over your own kind?" Evan's voice was calm but dangerous. "I'm choosing what's right. The crowd slowly dispersed, muttering threats. When he came back inside, Lyra was trembling. "They'll hurt you because of me," she whispered. Evan shrugged. "Let them try. I've been through worse." Joel looked at both of them, shaking his head. "Boss, you don't get it. These people don't forget. They'll make you pay for standing with her." Evan wiped his hands and looked at Lyra. "Let them come. I fix broken things. Maybe it's time I fix this colony too." Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time in years, she felt something she had lost: trust. As she left that evening, rain poured harder, turning the streets into rivers of light. Her reflection shimmered on the wet ground beside the glow of shop lights. From a dark alley, two figures watched her again, the same men as before. One of them spoke into a comm device, his voice cold and sharp. "She's working for him now," he said. The widow found help. A pause, then a reply crackled through static. "Then make sure she regrets it." Lyra walked home under the storm, unaware that her gift had just made her a target, and Evan Cross, the human mechanic, had unknowingly stepped into a fight much larger than broken machines. Night came early on Valora 9. The colony's weak sun sank behind steel towers, leaving the streets glowing with red lights and drifting smoke. In the narrow alleys of District 12, whispers moved faster than the wind. The alien widow had been seen again, working in a human's shop. By the time Lyra reached her small apartment, she felt the eyes on her. Someone was watching. She turned a few times, scanning the corners, but only saw moving shadows and flickering lamps. Still, the feeling wouldn't fade. Her building was old and half-broken, its walls stained with rust and mold. She climbed the stairs to her room, her hands trembling slightly. Inside, her daughter Sarah sat curled under a thin blanket, a small oxygen mask pressed to her face. The air purifier in the corner buzzed weakly. "Mother," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're late." "I'm sorry," Lyra said softly. The shop was busy. "But look." She opened her small food container. "I brought fruit cubes. Fresh ones." Sarah's tired eyes brightened. "Real ones?" "Yes, real ones," Lyra smiled. "Eat slowly." As her child ate, Lyra looked out the window. Down below, the streets glimmered with neon blue fog, but in the reflection she saw something else. A shadow, still and tall, standing across the road, watching. Her stomach tightened. She closed the curtain. That night she barely slept. Every sound made her flinch: the dripping pipe, the hum of a delivery drone, the distant rumble of machinery. Once she thought she heard footsteps outside her door, but when she checked, the hallway was empty. When morning came, she found something new on the wall beside her door: a crude symbol painted in black, a human skull with alien eyes. It meant one thing, a warning. Her hands shook as she wiped it off, but it left a dark stain behind, like a wound that wouldn't heal. At Cross Mechanics, Evan noticed her silence the moment she arrived. "You okay?" he asked, leaning on a crate. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Just tired," he frowned. "You look worse than tired." She didn't want to tell him. She didn't want to bring her fear into the only place that felt safe. But when he kept watching her, waiting, she whispered, "Someone marked my door last night." Evan's expression hardened. "Show me." "No," she said quickly. "It's better if you don't get involved." He crossed his arms. "Lyra, I already am involved." Joel, who'd been listening from the back, muttered, "He's right. Word's out. Novacor's goons are stirring things up. They don't like you working here." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Novacor? But they were my husband's company." Evan nodded grimly. "Yeah, and they don't like loose ends." Later that day, 3 men entered the shop. Their uniforms bore the Novacor logo, a silver gear with a black star inside. They looked around the place like they already owned it. The leader, a tall man with cold gray eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Cross." Evan didn't look up from his workbench. "Can I help you?" "You can start by firing her." The man pointed at Lyra, who stood frozen beside the fusion regulator she'd repaired. "Not happening," Evan said calmly. The man's lips curved into a smile. "You're making a mistake. That woman's husband caused an explosion that killed 20 of our workers. You want to risk your business for her?" Evan met his gaze. "You mean your company's cover-up killed them?" "And yes, I'll risk it." The man's smile vanished. "You talk brave for a mechanic." He leaned closer. "You have no idea what you're getting into." "I've been through worse," Evan said, turning back to his work. The man's tone turned sharp. "This is your last warning, Cross. The next time we come, we won't be talking." They left, but the silence they left behind was heavier than metal. Joel exhaled. "Boss, that was Novacore security, not miners. Real company muscle." Evan looked at Lyra. "They're scared of you. That means you've got something they don't want out." Lyra frowned. "I don't understand." "Maybe it's time we find out," Evan said. That evening, when she returned home, her door was half open. She froze. The air purifier was smashed. The small lamp on the table was shattered. And Sarah, her daughter, was gone. "No," Lyra whispered, dropping to her knees. The apartment was silent except for the faint static of a broken communicator. On the table, a note blinked in red letters. "You were warned." Tears blurred her vision. She stumbled back into the hallway, screaming her daughter's name. "Sarah!" But no one answered. Her mind raced. Who would take her? Novacore, the miners? Someone else? Her fear turned to fire. She wiped her tears, grabbed her husband's old data tablet, and left. There was only one person she could trust now. When she reached Cross Mechanics, Evan was still there, cleaning his tools. The moment he saw her face, he dropped the rag. "Lyra? What happened?" "They took her," she said, voice breaking. "They took my child?" Evan's eyes went cold. "Who? I don't know. But they left this." She handed him the tablet where the blinking red message glowed. He read it once, jaw tightening. "Novacore." Lyra looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Help me find her, Evan, please." He nodded without hesitation. "We will, I promise." And as thunder rolled over the colony, the human mechanic and the alien widow stood side by side, no longer just allies, but partners against something far greater. Neither of them knew it yet, but the truth they were about to uncover would shake the entire colony and expose the lies that had destroyed both of their lives. The night was thick with smoke and static as Evan and Lyra searched the lower district. The streets glowed with broken neon lights buzzing faintly in the toxic air. Somewhere in the maze of alleys, Lyra's daughter was missing, and every second felt like a lifetime. Evan moved fast, his hand gripping a portable scanner. Lyra followed, clutching her husband's old data tablet. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned bright with desperation. "They must have taken her because of me," she said, voice trembling. "Because of what I found." "What did you find, Lyra?" Evan asked, slowing his pace. She hesitated. "After the explosion, I found this tablet in my husband's locker. It was damaged. I thought it was just his work records. But last night I decrypted a file I'd never seen before." "What's in it?" "Proof," she whispered. "Proof that Novacore caused the explosion." Evan stopped walking. "Wait, caused it? On purpose?" She nodded. "They called it a containment accident, but it wasn't. My husband discovered they were overloading the reactors to extract more fuel faster. He tried to shut it down. The logs say he sent a distress signal right before the detonation, but someone deleted that message from the public record." Evan clenched his jaw. "Someone covered it up." "Someone high up?" "Yes. And now they know I have it." Lightning flashed above them, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Evan glanced around the empty street, every instinct screaming danger. "Then they didn't just take Sarah, they're sending a message." Lyra's voice cracked. "She's only 6 years old." "What kind of monsters use a child for revenge?" "The kind who run Novacore," he said coldly. They reached an abandoned communications outpost on the colony's edge. Evan pried open the rusted door and led her inside. The room smelled of dust and burnt wires. He connected the tablet to an old terminal, sparks flickering across the screen. "Let's see what they wanted to hide," he muttered. Lines of alien text filled the monitor, mixed with human code. The file was heavily encrypted. Lyra's hands shook. "I can't unlock it without a key." Evan grinned faintly. "Good thing I used to work in the fleet." "I've cracked worse," he started typing, fingers moving fast. Outside, the wind howled through the broken shutters. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then, click, the screen blinked. The file opened. They watched as video logs appeared, security footage from inside the Novacore mine. The recording showed human engineers shouting, alarms blaring, reactors overheating. In the corner of the frame, a figure, Lyra's husband, was manually shutting down the system. "He's trying to save them," Lyra whispered, tears streaming down her face. Then a voice echoed through the speakers. "Override protocol. Detonate containment. We can't let this leak," Lyra froze. The voice was cold, confident, and human. Evan leaned forward. That's Commander Holt, Nova Corps' director. On screen, the explosion triggered. A wave of light filled the tunnel. The footage cut out. Silence. Lyra covered her mouth. He killed them. He killed all of them to hide his crime. Evan stared at the data, his fists tightening. And your husband died trying to stop it. She nodded, sobbing quietly. He died a hero, and they made him a villain. Evan's voice was low and steady. Then we're going to make sure the whole galaxy knows the truth. But before they could transfer the files, a sharp crack echoed outside, the sound of a drone engine. Evan's eyes widened. They found us. Lyra looked toward the window. A red targeting beam swept across the floor. They're here for the tablet. Run! Evan grabbed her arm, and they sprinted through the back exit as plasma rounds tore through the walls. The air filled with heat and dust. They ducked into the drainage tunnels beneath the outpost, their footsteps splashing through filthy water. Above them, drones hummed, scanning for movement. Evan stopped beside a junction box, panting. We need to hide that data. If they take us, it can't fall into their hands. Lyra nodded, breathing hard. I can encode it into the colony's public network. It will take time, but they won't find it. Do it. She knelt in the tunnel, fingers glowing as she linked the tablet to a comm line. The screen pulsed, sending encrypted packets into the system. Evan kept watch, his wrench in one hand, his old plasma cutter in the other. He could hear footsteps echoing above them. Hurry, he said. Almost there. The tablet beeped once, upload complete. But then a shadow dropped from the tunnel above. A man in a black exosuit landed hard, water splashing everywhere. His visor glowed red. Give me the data, alien, he said through his modulator. Lyra froze. Evan stepped between them. You want it? You'll have to go through me. The man smirked. Gladly. He swung his arm, a shock baton sparking with blue light. Evan blocked it with his wrench, the clash echoing through the tunnel. Sparks flew. Lyra screamed, Evan! He pushed back, driving the attacker into the wall, but another drone swooped in from above. Its laser locked onto Lyra. Without thinking, Evan shoved her aside as the beam fired. It struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell hard, his tool clattering across the floor. Evan! He groaned, gripping his burned arm. Go! Finish it! Lyra grabbed the tablet, pressed the final command, and the screen went dark. It's done. The truth is safe. She turned to Evan, who struggled to stand, his eyes full of pain but also pride. Good, he whispered. Now we fight for her. Lyra nodded, fire in her voice. For Sarah, and for the truth. They ran deeper into the tunnels as the Nova Corps agents shouted after them. The chase had begun, and somewhere hidden inside the colony's network, the proof of Nova Corps' crime now waited, ready to burn an empire of lies. The colony dawned under blood-red skies. Alarms echoed from distant sectors as patrol ships swept through the clouds. To most people of Valora 9, it was just another tense morning. But for Evan and Lyra, this was the calm before a storm. Inside Cross Mechanics, the air was thick with the smell of oil and smoke. Evan sat on a metal crate, his shoulder wrapped in a crude bandage. The plasma wound from the night before still burned, but he ignored the pain. His eyes were fixed on the small monitor flickering beside him. Lyra stood near the workshop's back door, holding the data tablet that now contained the only proof of Nova Corps' crimes. She looked exhausted, her eyes dark, her hands trembling, but her voice was steady. I sent the transmission to the Galactic Tribunal, she said quietly. The file was received, but no reply yet, Evan sighed. They'll reply. The question is whether we'll still be alive when they do. The shop was eerily silent. Joel hadn't shown up for work. The outside streets were empty. Even the usual sounds of the colony, metal footsteps, engines, shouts, were gone. Something was coming. Evan stood up and pulled down the shutters. We're locking in. No one leaves until I say so, Lyra frowned. Do you think they'll attack here? He met her gaze. They won't ask questions this time. Minutes later, a loud boom shook the ground. The walls trembled. Lyra stumbled back, clutching the table for balance. Evan rushed to the window and pulled the curtain aside. His face darkened. They're here. Outside, armored transports rolled through the street. Nova Corps security, black suits, heavy drones, plasma rifles. A dozen soldiers surrounded the workshop, their red visors glowing through the smoke. One of them shouted through a megaphone, Evan Cross. You are harboring a fugitive and stolen property. Surrender the alien and the device immediately. Evan muttered, property. They call you property now. Lyra's voice trembled. They'll kill you for helping me. He looked at her, eyes fierce. Then I'll make it worth their effort. The first drone fired, blasting the front shutters off their hinges. Metal screamed. Evan ducked behind a workbench, dragging Lyra with him. Tools and sparks flew across the room. Stay low, he yelled, reaching for his plasma cutter. He fired a burst at the nearest drone. It exploded in a flash of light, pieces scattering across the floor. More drones poured in through the windows. Red beams sliced through the air, burning through walls and tables. Lyra grabbed a wrench and dove under a fallen beam, yanking loose a power cable. Evan, the backup grid. He nodded. On it. They raced to the back of the shop, dodging the lasers. The power grid was old, unstable, but it had one advantage. It could overload. Lyra pulled open the panel, her hands glowing as she rerouted the circuits. The hum grew louder, electric arcs dancing around her. Evan shouted, "Now, Lyra!" She slammed the final switch. The entire workshop erupted in a shockwave of blue light. Every drone within 50 meters fried instantly, their circuits melting midair. Soldiers stumbled, their visors flickering. When the smoke cleared, silence returned. Only the crackle of broken wires. Evan stood up, coughing. Nice trick, Lyra gave a tired smile. It won't stop them for long. He nodded grimly. Then we move. They grabbed what little gear they had and ran through the back alley. Behind them, sirens wailed again. Reinforcements. As they ran, Lyra glanced back at the burning shop. The place that had given her her first chance. Her heart clenched. I'm sorry, she whispered. Evan didn't slow. Don't be. It was just a building. You're what matters. They reached the edge of the industrial sector, a maze of pipes and vents. Ahead, a transport shuttle waited, half-rusted but operational. Joel stepped out from behind it, looking nervous. Took you long enough, he said. Evan blinked. Joel, you stayed? Someone had to make sure you two idiots didn't die. He tossed Evan a small data drive. Backup copy. I mirrored the files before they torched your systems. Evan grinned. Smart kid, Lyra's voice shook. They took my daughter, Joel. She's somewhere in their compound. We have to get her, Joel nodded. Yeah, I heard. They moved all detainees to the upper dome, Sector 7 inside Novacore HQ. Evan's face hardened. Then that's where we're going. Joel looked shocked. That's suicide. You can't just walk into their fortress. Evan smiled grimly. Who said anything about walking? He pointed to the shuttle. Moments later, the old craft roared to life. The engines coughed but held steady. As it lifted off the ground, soldiers poured into the alley below, firing at them. Plasma bolts streaked past the hull, but Evan kept steady hands on the controls. Lyra gripped the co-pilot's seat, her eyes locked on the burning colony below. Evan, if we don't make it, we will, he interrupted. I didn't fix half this junkyard to die now. As they ascended into the smoke-filled sky, the colony light stretched out beneath them, cold, endless, and broken. Somewhere inside that maze of metal and greed, a small girl was waiting. Evan's voice was steady as he set the coordinates. We get Sarah, we take down Novacore, and we show the galaxy what they really are. Lyra turned to him, her fear slowly fading into determination. Then let's finish what they started. The shuttle shot forward, engines screaming as it disappeared into the dark clouds. Behind them, the ruins of Cross Mechanics burned in blue fire. The war for truth had begun, and there was no turning back. The black clouds over Valora 9 churned like boiling smoke as the stolen shuttle tore through the atmosphere. The engine screamed, leaving a trail of fire behind it. Inside the cockpit, Evan Cross gripped the controls, his knuckles white. Beside him, Lyra sat with eyes fixed ahead, toward the glittering towers of Novacore headquarters, where her daughter was being held. Beneath them, the colony spread like a wound, broken streets, dying lights, and a people too afraid to fight. But tonight everything was going to change. Evan's voice broke the silence. You ready? Lyra nodded, though her hands trembled. I've been ready since the day they called my husband a criminal. Joel's voice crackled over the comms from the rear cabin. Power cells at 60%. Weapons still half-fried. We've got one shot at this, Evan smirked. Then let's make it count. The shuttle dove lower, slicing through the smog. In the distance, Novacor's tower gleamed like a blade, miles of steel and glass surrounded by floating defense drones. It was the heart of everything that had destroyed her life. Lyra whispered, "That's where my child is." Evan's tone hardened. "Then we bring her home." They hit the compound fast. The shuttle roared across the landing platforms, blasters firing. Security troops scattered as the craft smashed through the hangar doors, sliding to a halt amid sparks and debris. Evan jumped out first, plasma cutter in one hand, rifle in the other. Lyra followed, clutching the small data tablet, the proof that could bring Novacor down. Alarms blared through the building. "Intruders detected," echoed across the corridors. Red lights flashed, bathing everything in blood-colored glow. "Sector 7, Joel shouted, checking his wristpad. "Containment blocks down that way." They sprinted through the maze of corridors. Soldiers poured from every doorway, but Lyra moved like a storm, her alien senses guiding her through the chaos. She used her tools to overload doors, short out drones, and confuse scanners. Evan covered her flank, firing short bursts. "You're full of surprises," he said between shots. She smiled faintly. "So are you." At last they reached the containment block, a cold steel chamber lined with energy cells. Lyra's heart stopped when she saw a small figure behind one of the barriers. "Sarah!" Her daughter looked up, eyes wide, face pale under the dim blue light. "Mama!" Evan shot the control panel. The field dropped and Lyra ran forward, wrapping her child in her arms. Tears streaked her cheeks as Sarah clung to her neck. "I'm here," Lyra whispered. "I'm here, my little star." Evan smiled, but it didn't last long. A deep metallic voice boomed from the speakers above. Touching. Truly touching. They looked up to see Commander Holt appear on a large screen, his uniform pristine, his expression calm. "So," he continued, "the mechanic and the alien widow. Heroes of the hour," Evan snarled. "You murdered 20 people and blamed her husband. We've got proof," Holt smirked. "Proof? You think the Galactic Tribunal will believe the word of a miner's widow and a disgraced soldier over a corporation that feeds half the colonies?" Lyra stepped forward, holding up the tablet. "They won't have to believe us. They'll see it." She tapped a button. The tablet projected the recorded footage, the reactor logs, the detonator orders, Holt's own voice commanding the explosion. The image streamed directly into the open tribunal network. Across Valora 9, every public screen flickered to life. Citizens stopped in the streets. Miners, workers, and soldiers watched in silence as the truth played out before their eyes. Holt's smile faded. What have you done?" Lyra's voice was cold as steel. "I gave them what you tried to bury." Evan raised his weapon. "It's over, Holt." The commander shouted orders, but it was too late. Security officers began lowering their weapons, some watching the broadcast with disgust, others ripping the Novacor insignia from their uniforms. The building shook as the crowd outside began to rise. Thousands of workers, humans and aliens alike, flooded the square. The chant grew louder. "Justice for the miners." "Down with Novacor!" Evan looked at Lyra, breathless. "You did it." She shook her head, holding Sarah close. "We did it." Hours later, the flames of rebellion burned across the colony. The Galactic Tribunal ships arrived, shining bright in the dark sky. Holt and his officers were taken into custody, their crimes broadcast live. At dawn, Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt streets. The air was clearer now, the dust finally settling after years of silence. Beside her, Evan leaned against the rail, shoulder freshly bandaged but smiling for the first time in years. "So," he said, "what'll you do now?" Lyra looked at Sarah, who was laughing with a group of children, Human and Valen playing together under the morning sun. "I think I'll live," she said softly, "and help rebuild what they broke." Evan nodded. "I could use a partner. Crossin' Lyra Repairs has a nice ring to it." She laughed. A sound the colony hadn't heard from her in a long time. "Only if I get half the profits." "Deal." They stood there in silence, watching as dawn spread across Valora 9. The colony that once hated her now cheered her name. The alien widow had become a symbol, a voice for every soul who'd ever been silenced. Evan looked at her one last time and said quietly, "You fixed more than machines, Lyra." She turned toward him, smiling. "So did you." Above them, the suns rose together for the first time in months, bright golden and warm, and as their light touched the streets of Valora 9, Hope returned to a world that had almost forgotten what it felt like to be human.